The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Elena Marsh received the call. She almost did not answer it. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she wrapped a bandage around the leg of an injured fox, and for a moment she considered letting it ring out. But the number belonged to Dr. Whitfield, the director of Northgate Research Facility, and something told her this call mattered. "We need you," he said, his voice tight and unfamiliar. "There is a man here. No one can get near him. He has hurt 3 of our staff already. We were told you specialize in cases like this." Elena set down her gauze. "I work with animals, Dr. Whitfield, not people. That is exactly why we called you." She should have asked more questions. She should have demanded to know what kind of facility kept a man in a condition that required an animal specialist. Instead, she found herself thinking of her brother, Daniel, who had vanished 18 months ago while researching a rare neurological disorder that stripped people of language, memory, and reason, leaving something wild behind. She had never stopped looking for answers about what happened to him. Northgate was one of the last places on his list of contacts before he disappeared. Before she left the house, Elena stood for a long moment in front of the corkboard in her study, where photographs and notes about Daniel's disappearance were pinned in careful rows. She touched the edge of a photograph of the 2 of them as children, standing beside an injured owl they had rescued together. Even then, Daniel had believed that broken things deserved patience rather than fear. She grabbed her coat, tucked a small notebook into her bag out of habit, and drove into the storm. The roads grew narrower as she left the city behind, the streetlights giving way to dark stretches of forest broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. She thought about turning back more than once. Every instinct she had built over years of working with injured and traumatized animals told her that walking into an unknown facility, at night, to face a man no one else could control, was reckless. But she thought of Daniel's voice, calm and certain, telling her once that the bravest thing a person could do was sit still in front of something frightening long enough to understand it. She drove through the night, arriving at a compound hidden behind a wall of pine trees an hour outside the city. Dr. Whitfield met her at the gate, his face pale under the security lights. "His name is Cain," he explained as they walked. 31 years old. He was brought to us 14 months ago after a laboratory accident overseas. The trauma changed him. He no longer speaks. He reacts to loud noises, bright lights, and sudden movement with extreme aggression. We have tried sedation, isolation, and behavioral therapy. Nothing has worked. And you want me to go in there? We want you to try. If you cannot help him, we will have no choice but to transfer him to a permanent containment facility. That is not a life, Miss Marsh. That is a cage for the rest of his years. Elena looked through the reinforced glass at the enclosure beyond. It was larger than she expected, built like a section of forest brought indoors, with a floor of packed earth and a single skylight overhead. In the far corner, barely visible in the shadows, a figure crouched low, motionless, watching. "Give me the room," she said. "No guards, no cameras with flashing lights, and no one interrupts me, no matter what they think they see." Dr. Whitfield hesitated, then nodded. He knew, as she did, that this might be the last option left. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. Elena stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light, letting her breathing slow the way she had trained herself to do with frightened wolves and wounded hawks. She did not look directly at Cain. Direct eye contact was a threat in the animal world, and she suspected it was the same here. She sat down on the earthen floor, several feet from the wall, and simply waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. Cain did not move from his corner, but she could feel his attention on her, sharp and unblinking. She began to speak, quietly, not to him exactly, but into the space between them. "My brother used to tell me that fear makes everything look like a threat," she said. "He studied people who had been through terrible things. He said the body remembers even when the mind forgets. I think that is what happened to you." Cain's breathing changed, just slightly. She continued. "His name was Daniel. He disappeared before he could finish his work. I have been trying to find out what happened to him ever since. I do not know if any of this makes sense, but it feels wrong to just sit in silence." She talked for hours, sharing memories of her brother, of the summers they spent together, of the animals she had helped throughout her life who had trusted her not because she forced them to, but because she waited long enough for them to choose her instead. She removed her shoes without announcing it, another old trick, a small signal of vulnerability that predators and frightened creatures alike seemed to understand. Sometime near midnight, Cain shifted his position. He crept a few feet closer, staying low, his movements careful and deliberate rather than wild. Elena did not turn to look at him directly. She kept her voice low and even. "You do not have to come any closer than feels safe," she said. "I am not here to hurt you." He stopped, crouched at the edge of the shadows, close enough now that she could see his eyes. They were not the eyes of someone lost entirely to instinct, as the reports had suggested. There was something searching in them, something aware, buried beneath the fear. Hours passed this way, in small increments of trust. Elena would speak, and Cain would edge closer, then retreat when a sound outside startled him, then return again. Each time he pulled back, she resisted the urge to follow, letting the distance close on his terms rather than hers. She thought of the wolves she had worked with years earlier, animals who had been mistreated before they came to her, who needed to learn that stillness did not always mean danger. By 3 in the morning he sat within arm's reach, though neither of them touched. She had never felt more certain that patience was the only language that mattered. At one point, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky outside, and Cain flinched hard, pressing himself flat against the earth, with his arms curled over his head. Elena did not reach for him. She simply lowered her own voice further and kept talking, describing the sound of rain on her childhood roof, the way she and Daniel used to count the seconds between lightning and thunder to guess how close a storm was. Slowly, his breathing evened out again. When he lifted his head, he looked at her with something that resembled surprise, as though he had expected her to leave, or worse, to react with the same fear the guards always showed him. "You did not run," he said, so quietly she almost missed it, the first fragment of a sentence he had managed since she arrived. Elena kept her voice gentle. "I am not going anywhere." It was near 4 when the guard outside, worried after hearing rustling on the monitor, unlocked the outer door and stepped partway into the enclosure with a sedative gun raised. The sudden light and motion sent Cain into a crouch, muscles coiled, a low sound rising in his throat. Elena moved instinctively, stepping between him and the guard. "Put it down," she said sharply. "Now, you are making it worse." "Miss Marsh, step away." He could. "He has not touched me in 6 hours. Lower the weapon." The guard hesitated, then obeyed, backing out and sealing the door again. The tension in the room slowly eased. Cain remained close behind her, and when she finally turned to look at him fully, he was watching her with an expression she could only describe as grateful. Then he spoke. His voice was rough from disuse, cracked like a path that had not been walked in a long time, but the words were clear. "You came for him," Cain said, "for Daniel." Elena's heart stopped. "How do you know that name?" Cain's eyes clouded, as though the effort of speaking cost him something deep. "He talked about you, before they changed things." "Before who changed things?" "Cain, please, if you know anything about my brother." "They called it treatment," he said, the words coming slower now, as though each one had to be pulled up from somewhere buried. "It was not treatment. It took people who volunteered for something good and turned them into something else. Daniel found out. He tried to stop it." Elena's hands were shaking. "Is he alive?" Cain did not answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the ceiling, toward the world beyond the skylight he had not been allowed to enter in over a year. "I do not know," he finally admitted. "They separated us before I lost most of myself, but I remember his face. I remember he was kind to me, even when no one else was." The door at the far end of the observation hall opened, and Dr. Whitfield entered, flanked by 2 other staff members whose faces Elena did not recognize. His expression had changed since she last saw him, no longer worried, but calculating. "That is enough for tonight," he said. "You have made remarkable progress, Miss Marsh, more than we expected, but I think it is time to discuss next steps." "What did you do to him?" Elena demanded, rising to her feet. "What did you do to my brother?" Dr. Whitfield's calm expression flickered. I do not know what he has told you, but Cain's condition is the result of an unfortunate accident, nothing more. He just told me this facility experimented on people. That my brother tried to expose it. Cain is not a reliable source of information. His mind is fractured. You cannot trust anything he says. Cain rose slowly to his feet beside her, taller than she had realized, his posture no longer that of a frightened animal, but of a man remembering how to stand. I remember enough, he said. I remember the room where they kept us. I remember the drugs. I remember Daniel Marsh telling them he would report everything, and I remember them taking him away and telling us he had been transferred. Dr. Whitfield's jaw tightened. He gestured to the men behind him, and Elena realized with a cold certainty that they were not there to help. Elena, he said, his voice losing its practiced calm, you need to step back from him. He is dangerous. Whatever he has told you is a delusion caused by his condition. I do not believe you, Elena said. I think you are afraid of what he remembers. The two men moved forward, and Cain stepped in front of Elena without hesitation. The same protective instinct she had used to earn his trust now turned outward to shield her. The guard from earlier tried to raise the sedative gun again, but Cain moved faster than anyone expected, not with violence, but with the sharp, controlled speed of someone whose body had relearned survival even as his mind was healing. He knocked the weapon aside and pulled Elena toward the door. Run, he said. They moved together through the corridor, Cain leading with an instinct for the building's layout that surprised even him, as though buried memories of his time there were resurfacing exactly when needed. Alarms began to sound. Elena's mind raced through everything Dr. Whitfield had said and failed to say, piecing together a truth far darker than she had imagined. Her brother had not disappeared by accident. He had uncovered something Northgate wanted buried, and he had paid for it. Behind them they could hear Dr. Whitfield shouting orders, his voice sharp with a panic that told Elena everything she needed to know about how much he had to lose if the truth escaped these walls. Doors slammed in the distance. Footsteps echoed against metal floors. Cain pulled her through a side passage lined with old equipment and dust-covered crates, ducking beneath a broken pipe without breaking stride, his body remembering pathways his mind could not yet explain. How do you know this way? Elena asked between breaths. I do not know, Cain admitted. My feet remember. That is all I have right now. They reached a maintenance exit at the rear of the compound, just as the first hint of dawn touched the sky. Cain forced the door open, and cold morning air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant rain. For a moment they simply stood in the doorway, breathing hard, staring out at a world Cain had not seen freely in over a year. We need to go now, Elena said, before they seal the perimeter. Cain looked back once at the building behind them, then at Elena. I do not remember how to be free, he admitted quietly. I do not know what I am anymore. Elena took his hand, the first time either of them had touched since the night began. You are someone who protected me tonight, when you had every reason to be afraid. That is enough to start with. They ran together through the tree line as the sun rose behind the clouds, leaving behind the compound and its secrets, though not the questions that still needed answers. Elena knew the search for her brother was far from over, and that Cain held pieces of the truth that would take time to fully recover. But as they slowed to a walk on a quiet road outside the facility, she understood something else with complete clarity. Cain did not look at her as a stranger who had wandered into his cage. He looked at her as the one steady presence in a mind that had been shattered and was only beginning to rebuild itself. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still waited in the answers they had yet to uncover, neither of them would face it alone. By the time the sun fully cleared the horizon, painting the wet road gold, Cain spoke again, his voice steadier than it had been all night. Thank you for not being afraid of me. Elena smiled, exhausted but certain. Thank you for trusting me enough to remember who you were. They walked on together into the morning light, two people carrying broken pieces of the past, but for the first time in a long while, neither of them was carrying it alone.